The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden platform, and Delilah Jenkins felt her heart hammering so hard she worried it might harm the baby growing inside her belly. She pressed one hand protectively against the swell beneath her traveling dress, hidden by the careful draping of her shawl, and took a steadying breath. The journey from Philadelphia to Nevada City, California had taken 3 weeks, and every mile had given her more time to rehearse what she would say when she arrived. Now, as the dust settled around the coach wheels and she peered through the window at the small frontier town stretched before her, all those carefully prepared words scattered like tumbleweeds. The driver yanked open the door, his weathered face kind despite the hard lines carved by sun and wind. "Here we are, Miss. Nevada City. You need help with your trunk," Delilah nodded, not trusting her voice. She gathered her skirts and accepted his hand, stepping down onto the wooden platform. The air here was different from back east, drier and sharper, carrying scents of pine from the surrounding mountains and something else. Something wild and untamed that made her stomach flutter with nerves that had nothing to do with her condition. She was 22 years old, 3 months pregnant with another man's child, and about to meet the cowboy who had responded to her advertisement for a mail-order bride. The cowboy who had no idea about the baby, shame burned in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had written 3 letters to Franklin Peters over the past 4 months, and in each one she had meant to tell him the truth. But the words never came. How did you explain to a stranger that you were carrying the child of a man who had promised marriage, taken what he wanted, and then disappeared when he learned of the consequences? How did you ask someone to accept damaged goods? The platform was busy with afternoon traffic. Miners in dusty clothes clustered near the assay office across the street, their voices loud with excitement or disappointment depending on their fortunes. A freight wagon rumbled past, its bed loaded with timber. Women in calico dresses hurried along the wooden sidewalks, their faces showing the weariness that came from living in a place where civilization was still carving itself out of wilderness. "Miss Jenkins." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady, and Delilah turned so quickly her shawl slipped from her shoulders. She caught it just in time, pulling it tight around herself as she looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. Franklin Peters stood before her, hat in his hands, looking nothing like she had imagined and somehow exactly right. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his simple cotton shirt. His face was sun-bronzed and honest, with strong features that might have seemed harsh if not for the genuine nervousness in his expression. His dark brown hair was neatly combed, and she could see he had made an effort to clean up, though dust still clung to his boots. "Mr. Peters," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. His face broke into a smile that transformed him completely, erasing the nervous tension and revealing a warmth that made something in her chest tighten. "Please call me Franklin, or Frank if you prefer. I am mighty glad you made it safely. The journey must have been hard on you." He was looking at her with such open admiration that Delilah felt heat rise to her cheeks. She knew she was not unattractive. Her dark blonde hair and green eyes had drawn attention back in Philadelphia. But she had expected judgment, suspicion, or at least reservation. Instead, Franklin looked at her like she was something precious that had been delivered into his keeping. "It was long," she admitted, "but I am well enough." The baby chose that moment to make its presence known, a flutter of movement that was becoming more common. Delilah pressed her hand against her stomach without thinking, then realized what she had done and dropped her hand quickly. But Franklin's eyes had followed the gesture, and she saw a flicker of something cross his face. He did not comment on it. Instead, he gestured to her trunk, which the driver had unloaded. "I have a wagon just over here. I thought we could head out to the ranch before dark." "It is about an hour's ride. Or if you would rather stay in town tonight and rest, I can arrange a room at the hotel." "The ranch is fine," Delilah said quickly. She wanted to get this over with, wanted to tell him the truth before she lost her nerve entirely. She owed him that much. Even if it meant he would send her back on the next stage coach east. Franklin loaded her trunk into the back of a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 horses, then helped her up onto the bench seat with a gentleness that surprised her. His hands were calloused and strong, but his touch was careful, as if he worried she might break. As they rolled out of town, Delilah tried to steady her breathing. The mountains rose around them, covered in pine and scrub oak, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. It was beautiful in a raw, overwhelming way that was nothing like the ordered streets and gardens of Philadelphia. "The ranch belonged to my father," Franklin said, breaking the silence. "He passed 2 years ago. Left it to me and my brother, but Thomas headed up to Oregon last spring to try his luck there. So now it is just me and about 200 head of cattle, plus the horses." "That sounds like a lot of work for one man," Delilah ventured. "It is," he admitted. "I have a couple of hands who help during roundup and branding, but mostly I manage on my own. I was hoping that maybe having a wife would make the place feel less empty. Make it feel like a home again instead of just a place to work." The loneliness in his voice was palpable, and Delilah felt her resolve waver. This man was good. She could sense it in every word he spoke, in the gentle way he handled the horses, in the hope that colored his voice when he talked about making a home. And she was about to shatter whatever expectations he had built from her carefully vague letters. "Franklin," she started, then stopped. Her throat felt tight. He glanced at her, concern creasing his brow. "Are you all right? You have gone pale. Here, have some water." He reached behind the seat and produced a canteen, offering it to her. Delilah took a drink, grateful for the moment to collect herself. The water was cool and fresh, tasting of minerals. When she handed the canteen back, Franklin was watching her with such open worry that she could not bear it anymore. "I have to tell you something," she said, forcing the words out before courage failed her entirely. "Something I should have written in my letters, but I was too much of a coward." Franklin's hands tightened on the reins, but he kept his eyes on the road. "All right. I am pregnant." The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. 3 months along. "The father was a man in Philadelphia who promised to marry me, and when I told him about the baby, he disappeared. No one has seen him since. My family, they were so ashamed they would not even look at me anymore. My father told me I had to leave, that I had brought disgrace on the family name. That is why I placed the advertisement. That is why I am here. Not because I wanted to build a life with you specifically, but because I had nowhere else to go." Her voice broke on the last words, and tears spilled down her cheeks despite her best efforts to hold them back. She had promised herself she would not cry, would not play on his sympathies, but the shame and fear and exhaustion of the past months overwhelmed her defenses. The wagon rolled on for a long moment in silence. Delilah waited for Franklin to turn the horses around, to tell her she had deceived him and he wanted nothing to do with her. Instead, he pulled the wagon to a stop at the side of the road and set the brake. When he turned to look at her, his blue eyes were serious but not angry. "That took courage to tell me. Thank you for being honest." "I should have been honest from the start," Delilah said, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "You have every right to send me back. I will understand." Franklin was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from her face to her hands, which had unconsciously moved to protect her belly again. When he spoke, his voice was firm. "That baby will be mine too." Delilah's head snapped up. "What?" "If you will still have me as your husband, then that baby will be mine too," Franklin repeated. "I do not care who the father was. That man gave up any claim when he abandoned you. But I am here, and I am willing. That child needs a father, and you need a husband. And well, I need both of you more than you might think." Fresh tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks, but these were different. "You cannot mean that. You do not even know me. I know you were brave enough to cross the country alone in your condition. I know you told me the truth even when it would have been easier to hide it a while longer. I know you are scared and alone, and I know what that feels like." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough against hers. "I am not promising this will be easy. I am not saying we will fall in love overnight like in some storybook. But I am saying I meant what I wrote in my letters. I want a partner. I want a family. And if you are willing, I would like to try to build that with you." Delilah looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. There was no deception there, no hidden agenda, just honest hope and a loneliness that matched her own. "I will try," she whispered. "I will try to be a good wife to you." Franklin's smile returned, soft and warm. "That is all I can ask." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it and taking up the reins again. "Let us get you home." The ranch house appeared as they crested a small rise, and Delilah felt her breath catch. It was not grand, just a simple two-story structure built of timber and stone, but it sat in a valley surrounded by rolling pasture land with mountains rising in the distance. A barn stood nearby, along with a couple of smaller outbuildings. Cattle dotted the fields, and she could see chickens scratching in a pen beside the house. "It is not much," Franklin said, and she could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "But it is solid. My father built it to last." "It is beautiful," Delilah said honestly. And it was, in its simple, sturdy way. More than that, it looked like safety. It looked like a place where she could stop running. Franklin helped her down from the wagon, and this time his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, steadying her. "Watch your step. The ground is a bit uneven here." He carried her trunk inside, and Delilah followed, her eyes adjusting to the dimmer interior. The front door opened into a large main room that served as both kitchen and living space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and simple furniture filled the space, sturdy pine chairs and a table that looked handmade. Everything was clean but spare, clearly the home of a man living alone. "There are 2 bedrooms upstairs," Franklin said, setting her trunk down. "You can have the larger one. It has a better window, gets morning light. I will take the smaller room." Delilah turned to him in surprise. "We are not, you do not expect to share a room." A flush crept up Franklin's neck. "No, madam. I figure we should get to know each other first. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, that will be your choice to make. I will not force myself on you." The relief that flooded through Delilah was so intense it made her knees weak. She had been bracing herself for demands, for expectations that she would fulfill wifely duties immediately. The fact that Franklin was offering her time and choice was more than she had dared hope for. "Thank you," she said softly. "Are you hungry? I am not much of a cook, but I can manage beans and biscuits, maybe some bacon." Delilah surprised herself by laughing. "Actually, I am a good cook. If you show me where everything is, I would be happy to make supper." Franklin's face lit up. "Really? That would be wonderful. I have been eating my own terrible cooking for so long I have almost forgotten what a decent meal tastes like." They moved around the kitchen together, Franklin showing her where he kept supplies while Delilah assessed what she had to work with. It was basic, but she could make do. As she began preparing a simple stew with the vegetables and salt pork she found, Franklin carried her trunk upstairs. When he came back down, he hesitated in the doorway. "I need to tend to the horses and check on the stock before dark. Will you be all right here alone for a bit?" "I will be fine," Delilah assured him. "Take your time." After he left, she allowed herself to pause and take in her new reality. She was in California, in a ranch house in the mountains, preparing dinner for a man who was to be her husband. A man who had just promised to raise another man's child as his own. It felt surreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment, but the kick of the baby in her belly was real enough. She placed her hand over the spot, feeling the flutter of movement. "We are going to be all right," she whispered to the tiny life inside her. "We found a good man. We are going to be all right." By the time Franklin returned, the stew was simmering and filling the house with savory scents. He stopped in the doorway, inhaling deeply, and the look on his face made all the effort worthwhile. "That smells incredible," he said. They ate together at the simple pine table, and Delilah watched Franklin try to hide how much he was enjoying the food. He ate 3 helpings, apologizing each time he refilled his bowl but unable to stop himself. "I was not lying about my cooking," he said sheepishly. "This is the best meal I have had in months." "Then I am glad I can contribute something useful," Delilah replied. After dinner, Franklin insisted on cleaning up while Delilah rested. She protested, but he was firm. "You have traveled for 3 weeks. You are carrying a child. You should rest." She sat in one of the chairs near the fireplace, watching him work. His movements were efficient despite his claim of being a poor cook, and she found herself studying him in the lamplight. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, and more than that, he seemed genuinely kind. She had been so focused on her own problems that she had not really considered what he must be feeling, having a stranger arrive to become his wife. "Can I ask you something?" she ventured. "Of course." "Why did you want a mail-order bride? A man like you could have courted someone local." Franklin was quiet for a moment, his hands stilling in the wash basin. "There are not many unmarried women in Nevada City, and the ones who are here have their pick of men. I am just a rancher, nothing special. And after my father died, after Thomas left, the loneliness got to be too much. I would go days without talking to another soul. I wanted someone to share this life with, someone to build something with. I figured a woman back east looking for a new start might understand that better than the women here who have their families around them." The honesty in his words touched her. "I am glad you wrote back to my advertisement." He looked up and smiled. "So am I." That night, Delilah lay in the larger bedroom staring at the ceiling beams. The bed was comfortable, the quilts soft and well-made. Probably his mother's work, she thought. Through the wall, she could hear the faint sounds of Franklin moving around in the other bedroom, settling in for the night. She placed her hands on her belly, feeling the small curve that would only grow larger in the coming months. In 6 months, she would have a baby. In this house, with this man she barely knew. The thought should have terrified her, but instead she felt something else. Hope, maybe, or at least the possibility of hope. The next morning, Delilah woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly, splashing water on her face from the basin on the dresser, and went downstairs to find Franklin already up and moving. "Morning," he greeted her. "I made coffee. It is about the only thing I can make that is not terrible." She accepted a cup gratefully. "What time do you usually start work?" "Sunrise, mostly. But I waited this morning, thought maybe we should talk about how we want to do this." They sat at the table together, and Franklin outlined his daily routine. He worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, checking fences, moving cattle, tending to the horses. There was always something that needed doing. Delilah explained that she could handle the cooking and the house, and maybe tend a garden if there was one. "There is a garden plot my mother used to keep," Franklin said. "It has been fallow for 2 years, but the soil should still be good. I can help you turn it over if you want to plant." They spent the morning working together on the garden, Franklin doing the heavy work of breaking up the soil while Delilah pulled weeds and cleared away dead growth. It was hard work, and Delilah had to stop frequently to rest, but it felt good to be doing something productive. As they worked, they talked. Small things at first, favorite foods and memories of childhood. Franklin told her about growing up on the ranch, about his mother who had died when he was 15, about his father who had taught him everything about working cattle. Delilah shared carefully edited stories of her life in Philadelphia, leaving out the painful parts, focusing on happier memories. "You miss it," Franklin observed. "The city." Delilah considered that. "I miss some things, the libraries, the theater, but there was a hardness there too, a judgment. Here it feels like there is room to breathe." "Well, there is plenty of room out here," Franklin said, gesturing at the wide expanse of land around them. "Room enough for whatever life we want to build." Over the following weeks they fell into a rhythm. Delilah managed the house, cooking meals that Franklin praised enthusiastically, mending clothes, keeping things tidy. Franklin worked the ranch, though he made a point of coming in for lunch each day, sitting with her and talking about his morning. They were careful around each other, polite and considerate. Franklin never pushed for more than she was ready to give, and Delilah found herself slowly relaxing in his presence. He was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man trying his best in difficult circumstances. As her belly grew more pronounced, Franklin became even more solicitous. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, brought her pillows to make sitting more comfortable, and worried constantly that she might be overdoing it. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she finally told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I know, but I worry," he admitted. "I have never done this before. I do not know what you need." The vulnerability in his voice made her soften. "Just be yourself." "That is what I need." One evening about 6 weeks after her arrival, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Franklin cleared his throat nervously. "I have been thinking," he said. "We should probably make this official. Get married properly, I mean. We have been telling people in town that we are already wed, but we are not really. I thought maybe we should go to the church next Sunday, have the reverend perform the ceremony." Delilah's heart fluttered. "All right, if that is what you want." "It is not about what I want," Franklin said quickly. "It is about doing right by you and the baby, making sure everything is legal and proper." She understood what he was not saying. He wanted to protect her reputation, wanted to make sure the baby was born legitimate in the eyes of the law. It was another kindness, another example of his thoughtfulness. "Then yes," she said, "let us get married properly." The following Sunday they rode into Nevada City in the wagon. Delilah wore her best dress, a deep green that brought out her eyes, and Franklin had put on a clean shirt and even shaved. They looked like any other couple heading to church, and if anyone noticed the swell of Delilah's belly, they were polite enough not to comment. Reverend Walsh was a kind older man with a white beard and gentle eyes. He asked them a few simple questions about their intentions, then performed a brief ceremony in the small church, with 2 of the congregation members serving as witnesses. When Franklin slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Walsh said with a smile. Franklin looked at Delilah, uncertainty in his eyes, silently asking permission. She nodded slightly, and he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a chaste, gentle kiss that lasted only a moment. But in that moment, Delilah felt something shift inside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with obligation or gratitude. They were truly married now. For better or worse, they were bound together. On the ride back to the ranch, Franklin seemed lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. "I know this was not how you imagined getting married. I am sorry it could not be more special." "It was perfect," Delilah said and meant it. There had been no pretense, no false promises. Just two people trying to build something real from difficult circumstances. That night, Delilah lay in bed touching the ring on her finger, turning it in the lamplight. She heard a soft knock on her door and called for Franklin to enter. He stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right. It was a big day." "I am fine," she assured him. "More than fine," he nodded but did not leave. "Delilah, I want you to know I meant those vows, for better or worse in sickness and health. I know we did not marry for love, but I promise I will do my best to be a good husband to you." "You already are," she said softly. Franklin's eyes met hers across the room, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. He smiled, bid her good night, and closed the door softly behind him. As summer gave way to autumn, Delilah's belly continued to swell. She was 5 months along now, and the baby was active, especially at night. Franklin had taken to placing his hand on her stomach when the baby kicked, his face lighting up with wonder each time he felt movement. "Does it hurt?" he asked one evening as they sat together after dinner. "No, not really. It feels strange but good. Like proof that there is really a person in there." Franklin's hand was warm against her belly, and Delilah found herself covering it with her own. "You are going to be a good father," she said. "I hope so. I want to be." He paused, then added quietly, "I already love this baby, you know." "It does not matter who the father was. This is our child now." Delilah's eyes filled with tears. Over the past months, Franklin had been unfailingly kind and patient, but this was the first time he had spoken so directly about his feelings for the baby. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being the man you are." Franklin shifted closer to her on the settee, his arm going around her shoulders. It was the most intimate contact they had shared beyond brief touches, and that one chaste kiss at their wedding. Delilah leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, and felt him relax. "I have been thinking," Franklin said after a while. "The baby will need a proper cradle. I have been working on one in the barn, using some oak that my father set aside years ago. I want to show you, make sure you like it." The next day, he led her out to the barn and showed her the cradle he had been building. It was beautiful, hand-carved with care, the wood sanded smooth and soft. Delilah ran her fingers over it, imagining their baby sleeping there. "It is perfect," she said. "When did you find time to make this?" "Evenings, mostly, after you go up to bed. I wanted it to be a surprise." He looked pleased by her reaction. "I am making a rocking horse, too, for when the baby is older." The image of Franklin hunched over his workbench late at night, carving toys for a baby that was not even his by blood, made Delilah's heart ache in a way she had not experienced before. This was not obligation or duty. This was love, pure and simple. She turned to him, and before she could second-guess herself, she reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "Franklin Peters, you are the best man I have ever known." His eyes widened, and she saw her own feelings reflected there, the growing affection that neither of them had spoken aloud. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he kissed her. This kiss was different from the one at their wedding. It was deeper, more certain, full of all the feelings that had been building between them over the past months. Delilah's hands slid from his face to his shoulders, and his arms came around her carefully, mindful of her belly. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Franklin rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he whispered. "I did not mean to, did not expect to, but I am." "I am falling in love with you too," Delilah admitted, and saying the words aloud made them real in a way that thinking them had not. From that day forward, something changed between them. They were more affectionate, more open. Franklin took to kissing her goodbye in the mornings before heading out to work, and Delilah found herself looking forward to his return each evening, watching from the window for his tall figure to appear over the rise. They still kept separate bedrooms, but the distance between them was closing. One night, about a week after their kiss in the barn, Delilah woke to cramping in her legs. She tried to walk it off, pacing her room, but the pain only intensified. She knocked softly on Franklin's door, and he appeared immediately, eyes alert despite the late hour. "What is wrong?" "Just leg cramps," she said, trying to smile through the discomfort. "I did not mean to wake you. Come here." He led her to his bed and had her sit, then knelt on the floor and began massaging her calves with strong, sure hands. The relief was immediate and intense. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "Horses get cramps too, same principle." He worked quietly for a while, then said, "You can stay here tonight if you want. If it would be more comfortable, I can sleep downstairs." "Stay with me," Delilah said impulsively. "Please." "I do not want to be alone." Franklin's hands stilled. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." They lay down together on his bed, Delilah's back to his chest, his arm draped carefully over her waist. She could feel the warmth of him all along her spine, could hear his heartbeat steady and strong. It felt right, lying here with him. It felt like home. "Is this all right?" Franklin asked softly. "It is perfect." After that night they shared a bed. Nothing more than sleeping, Franklin ever the gentleman, but the intimacy of waking up together, of falling asleep in each other's arms, deepened their bond in ways Delilah had not anticipated. As October turned to November, the weather grew colder. Franklin spent his days preparing the ranch for winter, reinforcing the barn, stacking firewood, moving the cattle to lower pastures. Delilah prepared the house, making sure they had plenty of preserved food, sewing baby clothes from fabric Franklin had brought back from town. She was 7 months along now, her belly large and unwieldy. Simple tasks had become difficult, and Franklin had taken to helping her with things she could no longer manage alone. He never made her feel weak or incapable, just quietly stepped in when needed. One afternoon, as she was trying to reach a jar on a high shelf, she felt a sudden sharp pain in her back. She gasped, grabbing the counter for support, and the jar slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Franklin appeared in the doorway, having heard the crash. "Are you hurt?" "No, just my back. The baby, I think, is pressing on something." She tried to bend to clean up the glass, but Franklin stopped her. "I will get that. You sit down." As he swept up the broken glass, Delilah watched him, feeling a surge of emotion so strong it took her breath. This man who had owed her nothing had given her everything. A home, his name, his protection. More than that, he had given her his heart. "Franklin," she said, waiting until he looked up at her. "I love you, not because you saved me, not out of obligation or gratitude. I love you because of who you are." He set down the broom and came to her, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "I love you too. You and this baby, you are my whole world now." He kissed her then, and Delilah felt the last of her walls crumble. She had been so afraid to trust, so afraid to believe that someone could truly love her despite her past. But Franklin did. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in his touch. That night, as they lay in bed together, Delilah took his hand and placed it on her belly. "Talk to the baby," she said. "I want the baby to know your voice." Franklin looked uncertain, but then he shifted down slightly, bringing his face close to her belly. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your papa. I know we have not met yet, but I am already so excited to meet you. Your mama and we are going to love you so much. You are going to have the best life we can give you." The baby kicked hard against Franklin's hand and he laughed in delight. "Did you feel that? The baby heard me." "The baby knows your voice," Delilah said, running her fingers through his hair. "Knows you are someone safe." As November progressed, Delilah began preparing in earnest for the birth. Franklin had brought the doctor from town to examine her, and Dr. Harrison had pronounced both mother and baby healthy. "The birth should be straightforward," he said, though he cautioned that first babies could be unpredictable. Franklin arranged for Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who lived in town and served as midwife to most of the area women, to stay with them when Delilah's time came. Mrs. Chen had visited twice already, checking on Delilah and bringing her special teas that she said would make the birth easier. "You are healthy, strong," Mrs. Chen said in her accented English. "Baby is positioned well. You will do fine." Despite the reassurances, as December approached and Delilah grew larger and more uncomfortable, fear began to creep in. She had heard stories of women dying in childbirth, of babies that did not survive. What if something went wrong? What if she left Franklin alone again after he had opened his heart? Franklin seemed to sense her fears. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he pulled her close. "Whatever happens, we will face it together. You are not alone anymore. Promise me something," Delilah said. "If something happens to me during the birth, promise you will take care of the baby. Love the baby like it is your own." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Franklin said fiercely. "I will not allow it. But yes, I promise. This baby is my own in every way that matters." 2 weeks before Christmas, Delilah woke in the early morning hours to wetness between her legs and a deep cramping in her lower back. She knew immediately what was happening. "Franklin," she said, shaking his shoulder. "It is time." He was up in an instant, pulling on his clothes. "I will ride for Mrs. Chen. Will you be all right here alone for an hour? I will be fine." "Go." After he left, Delilah paced the house, timing the contractions as Mrs. Chen had taught her. They were still far apart, which meant she had hours yet to go. She straightened the bedroom, changed the sheets, laid out the baby clothes she had prepared. Keeping busy helped calm her nerves. Franklin returned with Mrs. Chen in record time, both of them breathless from the hard ride. Mrs. Chen took charge immediately, examining Delilah and pronouncing that everything was progressing normally. "First baby, take long time," she said. "You walk, you rest, you breathe. Baby come when baby ready." The labor stretched through the day and into the night. Franklin stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand through contractions, helping her walk when Mrs. Chen said it would help things along, wiping her face with cool cloths when she grew feverish. "You are doing so well," he kept saying. "You are so strong." As midnight approached, the contractions grew closer together and more intense. Mrs. Chen checked her again and nodded in satisfaction. "Almost time. When next pain come, you push." Delilah had never experienced pain like this, but she also had never been more determined. This baby, hers and Franklin's now, was going to be born healthy. She would accept nothing less. "Push now," Mrs. Chen commanded, and Delilah bore down with all her strength. Franklin's hand gripped so tight in hers she worried she might break it. "That is it, you are doing it," Franklin said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can see the head. Oh God, Delilah, I can see our baby." One more push, then another, and suddenly there was a release of pressure and the sound of a baby crying, strong and loud. Mrs. Chen worked quickly, and then she was placing a squirming, wailing bundle on Delilah's chest. "Boy," Mrs. Chen announced with satisfaction. "Healthy boy." Delilah looked down at the tiny red face, the waving fists, and felt love crash over her like a wave. Her son. Their son. Franklin was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he gazed at the baby. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." Mrs. Chen gave them a few moments, then took the baby to clean him properly. She weighed him, swaddled him in warm blankets, and handed him to Franklin. "You hold son while I tend to Mama." Franklin held the baby like he was made of spun glass, staring down at the small face with such wonder that Delilah felt her heart might burst. This was her family, she realized. This man and this baby, they were hers and she was theirs, after Mrs. Chen had finished her work and pronounced both mother and baby healthy. She left them alone. Franklin sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the baby, and Delilah reached out to touch the soft, dark hair on her son's head. "What should we name him?" Franklin asked. They had discussed names over the past weeks but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at her son's face, Delilah knew exactly what felt right. "Samuel," she said. "After your father, Samuel Peters." Franklin's face crumpled and fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. "Samuel, yes. Papa would have loved that." He looked up at her, eyes shining. Thank you for this gift, for giving me a family again." "You gave me a family first," Delilah said. "You gave me everything when I had nothing." They spent the rest of the night taking turns holding Samuel, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, laughing when he yawned or made small baby noises. As dawn broke outside the window, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Franklin laid the baby in the beautiful oak cradle he had made and climbed into bed beside Delilah. "I never thought I could be this happy," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in this world," Delilah told him. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." The first months with Samuel were exhausting but joyful. He was a good baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Franklin was a natural father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Samuel when he fussed, singing to him in a surprisingly pleasant voice. Delilah watched him with their son and fell more in love every day. This was the man who had taken in a pregnant stranger and made her his wife. The man who had claimed another man's child as his own without hesitation. The man who now spent his evenings carving toys and telling stories to a baby too young to understand, but who seemed to listen anyway. As winter gave way to spring, they settled into their new life as a family of 3. Franklin continued working the ranch, though he came in more frequently now to check on Delilah and Samuel. Delilah managed the house and the baby, and when the weather warmed, she began planting the garden again. One afternoon in April, as Delilah nursed Samuel in the rocking chair Franklin had made for her, she looked up to find him watching them from the doorway. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He came into the room and knelt beside the chair, his hand resting on her knee. "I was thinking about the day you arrived, how scared you looked stepping off that stagecoach, and I was thinking about how much has changed since then. How much we have both changed. Do you regret it? Taking us in?" "Regret it?" Franklin looked shocked. "Delilah, you and Samuel are the best things that ever happened to me. I was half alive before you came, just going through the motions. Now I have a reason to wake up in the morning, a reason to build something that will last beyond my own lifetime. How could I regret that?" Delilah shifted Samuel to her shoulder, patting his back gently until he burped. "I want to give you a child of your own blood," she said quietly. "I want us to have more babies together." Franklin's eyes widened. "Samuel is my own, blood does not matter. I know that, but I still want it. I want to carry your baby to give you a child made from our love." She paused, then added shyly, "If you want that too." Franklin stood and drew her to her feet, taking Samuel from her and laying him in the cradle. Then he turned back to her, cupping her face in his hands. "I want everything with you. More babies, a lifetime together, growing old on this ranch. All of it." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Delilah responded in kind. That night, after they put Samuel to bed, they came together as husband and wife truly for the first time. It was tender and sweet, full of love and trust, and Delilah felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. She was not Delilah Jenkins anymore, ruined and ashamed. She was Delilah Peters, wife and mother, beloved and cherished. As spring turned to summer, life on the ranch found its rhythm. Samuel grew rapidly, his dark hair thickening, his eyes settling into a deep brown. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, and both Delilah and Franklin doted on him shamelessly. In July, 2 of Franklin's ranch hands returned for the summer roundup. Jake and Tom were good men, hard workers who had known Franklin since he was a boy. They were delighted to meet Delilah and Samuel, treating both with respect and affection. "Frank always was meant to be a family man," Jake told Delilah one evening when the men came up to the house for dinner. His parents, they had the same kind of partnership. You can tell when two people really fit together. Watching Franklin play with Samuel after dinner, bouncing him on his knee and making him giggle, Delilah had to agree. They did fit together, she and Franklin. What had started as a desperate arrangement had become a true marriage, a real family. As summer progressed, Delilah began to notice changes in her body. Her monthly courses, which had resumed after Samuel was born, stopped again. Her breasts became tender and certain smells made her nauseous. She recognized the signs but waited to be sure before saying anything. By September, there was no doubt. She was pregnant again, this time with Franklin's child. She chose to tell him on a Sunday morning after they had returned from church in town. Samuel was napping, and they were sitting on the porch enjoying the cooler autumn air. "Franklin, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the piece of leather he was working, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I am pregnant. About 3 months along, I think." For a moment, Franklin just stared at her. Then he let out a whoop of joy so loud it startled the chickens in the yard. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "We are having a baby," he said, his face split in an enormous grin. "Our baby." "Samuel is our baby too," Delilah reminded him gently. "Of course he is. I just meant this baby, you and I made this baby together, out of love." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Delilah felt well, and with experience from Samuel, she knew what to expect. Franklin was even more protective this time, if that was possible, constantly worrying that she might be overdoing it. "I managed an entire pregnancy while crossing the country alone," she reminded him when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I think I can handle this." "I know, but humor me. I like taking care of you." Samuel was walking now, toddling around the house and getting into everything. Franklin had built a small fence around the porch to keep him safe, and in the evenings they would sit and watch him play, talking about the future. "I want to expand the herd," Franklin said one night. "Maybe add sheep too for wool. If we are going to have a larger family, we will need more income." "How many children do you want?" Delilah asked, amused. "As many as you are willing to give me. A whole houseful, loud and messy and wonderful." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her growing belly. "I want to fill this house with love and laughter. I want our children to grow up knowing they are safe and wanted." Delilah thought about her own childhood, the cold disapproval of her parents, the way they had cast her out without a second thought when she needed them most. "Our children will never doubt that they are loved," she promised. "Never." In March, As the first flowers began to push through the soil in Delilah's garden, their second child was born. This labor was faster than the first, and by the time Mrs. Chen arrived, the baby was nearly there. "No time to waste," Mrs. Chen said, washing her hands quickly. "This baby in hurry." She was right. Less than an hour after the contractions had started in earnest, Delilah was holding a squalling red-faced infant. "Girl," Mrs. Chen announced. "Beautiful girl." Franklin was beside himself with joy. "A daughter. We have a daughter." He looked at Delilah with tears in his eyes. What should we name her? They had agreed that if the baby was a girl, Franklin would choose the name. He looked down at the tiny face, already calming now that she was in her mother's arms, and said quietly, "Rose, after my mother. Rose Peters." "Rose," Delilah repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect." Rose was a more demanding baby than Samuel had been. She wanted to be held constantly, fussing whenever she was put down. Franklin took to wearing her in a sling while he worked around the house, the baby content as long as she could feel his heartbeat. Samuel, now nearly 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would bring her his toys, pat her head gently, and ask repeatedly when she would be big enough to play with him. "Soon enough," Franklin would tell him. "She is growing every day." Life with 2 children was chaotic but full of joy. The house that had been so quiet when Delilah first arrived was now filled with baby cries and toddler laughter, with the sounds of a family being built. One evening, about a month after Rose was born, Delilah stood at the kitchen window washing dishes and watching Franklin in the yard. He had Samuel on his shoulders and was carrying Rose in the sling, walking the property line and pointing out different plants and animals to Samuel, who was too young to really understand but listened intently anyway. This man, who had promised that her baby would be his too, had kept that promise in every possible way. He loved Samuel with the same fierce devotion he showed to Rose. He never made a distinction between them, never treated one as more his than the other. They were both his children, fully and completely. As if sensing her watching, Franklin looked up and caught her eye. Even from this distance, she could see the love in his gaze, the contentment. He waved and she waved back, her heart so full it ached. That night, after both children were finally asleep, Franklin and Delilah collapsed into bed exhausted but happy. "2 children," Franklin said wonderingly. "We have 2 children. We do." "Are you overwhelmed?" "A little," he admitted, "but in the best possible way. I keep thinking about that day you arrived, how terrified I was that you would take one look at me and decide to get back on the stagecoach. I was so sure I was not enough, that I could not make you happy." Delilah turned to face him, cupping his jaw in her hand. "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. You gave me love when I thought I was unworthy of it. You gave me a family." "You gave me those things too," Franklin said. "Before you, I was just existing. Now I am living." They made love then, quiet and tender, mindful of the sleeping children down the hall. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Delilah thought about how far they had both come. 2 broken people who had found wholeness in each other. The years passed in a blur of busy, happy chaos. Samuel grew into a sturdy boy with Franklin's build and his biological father's dark coloring. Rose was all Franklin, with his blue eyes and his easy smile. When Samuel was 4 and Rose was 2, Delilah became pregnant again, and the following spring she gave birth to twin boys, James and John. "Twins," Franklin said in wonder, holding one in each arm. How did we get so lucky? The house they had thought was plenty big suddenly felt cramped with 4 children. Franklin spent that summer building an addition, 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Jake and Tom helped with the construction, and by fall, They had a home that could comfortably house their growing family. "Are we done now?" Franklin asked one night as they surveyed the chaos of 4 children under 5. "Because I love our kids more than life, but I am not sure we have enough hands between us for any more," Delilah laughed. "I think 4 is plenty. Let us see how we manage these before we consider adding to the brood." But life had other plans. 2 years later, when the twins were toddling around and getting into everything while Samuel started helping with small ranch chores, and Rose followed her father everywhere, Delilah found herself pregnant once more. "Number 5, Franklin said, shaking his head in amazement. "We are going to need a bigger table." This pregnancy was harder than the others. Delilah was tired all the time, her back ached constantly, and simple tasks left her winded. Franklin took on more of the household work, and they hired a young woman from town, Mary, to help with the children. In the 8th month, Dr. Harrison examined her and frowned. "I am hearing 2 heartbeats, Delilah. I think you might be carrying twins again." He was right. In January, during a snowstorm that blocked the roads and prevented Mrs. Chen from reaching the ranch, Delilah gave birth to twin girls with only Franklin and Mary to help. Anna and Alice were tiny but healthy, and watching Franklin hold his 2 new daughters, Delilah felt the same surge of love she had felt with each of their children. 6 children, Franklin said that night, after the babies were sleeping and Mary had taken the older children downstairs to give them privacy. "We have 6 children, and I love every single one of them more than I can say." "You are a good father," Delilah told him. "The best father I could have imagined for our children." "Our children," Franklin repeated. "That includes Samuel, you know. He is as much mine as any of them." Delilah knew that. Samuel, now 7 years old, worshipped Franklin. He spent every moment he could at his father's side, learning to rope and ride, helping with the cattle, absorbing everything Franklin could teach him about running a ranch. If he knew that Franklin was not his biological father, it did not matter to him. Franklin was his papa, the only father he had ever known or would ever need. With 6 children, life on the ranch was never quiet. There were always scraped knees to tend, quarrels to mediate, lessons to teach. But there was also laughter, so much laughter. The house rang with it, with the sound of children playing and parents who loved each other deeply. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Franklin surprised Delilah by arranging for Mary to watch the children overnight so they could have the house to themselves. He cooked dinner, badly but with such enthusiasm that Delilah could not help but be charmed. After they ate, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had on so many evenings. 10 years, Franklin said. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday you stepped off that stagecoach. Other times it feels like you have been here forever, like I cannot remember what life was like before you." "I cannot remember either," Delilah admitted. "Or maybe I just do not want to. This life here with you and the children, this is the only life that matters." Franklin pulled her close. "I have never told you this, but that day you arrived, I almost did not go to meet you. I was so scared you would be disappointed, that I would not be what you hoped for. But then I thought about how lonely I was, how empty the house felt, and I made myself go. Best decision I ever made." "I was terrified too," Delilah confessed. "I kept thinking you would take one look at my pregnant belly and send me away. When you said the baby would be yours too, I could not believe it. I thought surely there had to be a catch, some condition I was not seeing, but there was not. You loved me, for no reason except that you chose to." "I had every reason to love you. You are brave and strong and beautiful and kind. You made this house a home. You gave me a family. How could I not love you?" They made love that night with a passion that had not dimmed despite 10 years and 6 children. If anything, it had deepened, enriched by shared experiences and mutual respect, and a love that had been tested and proven true time and again. As the children grew, the ranch prospered. Franklin's careful management and hard work paid off. They expanded the herd, added sheep just as he had planned, and eventually built a small bunkhouse for the hands who worked for them during busy seasons. Samuel, at 13, was already nearly as tall as Franklin and could do a man's work on the ranch. He was responsible and serious, with a gentle way with animals that made him invaluable during branding and roundup. Rose, at 11, was spirited and fearless. She could ride as well as any of the ranch hands and was not afraid to get dirty. She begged Franklin constantly to teach her to rope, and he finally gave in, unable to deny his eldest daughter anything. The twins, James and John, were 9 and inseparable. They had their own language, finishing each other's sentences and always knowing what the other was thinking. They worked together to care for the chickens and the garden, tasks they had claimed as their own. Anna and Alice, the youngest at 5, were sweet and gentle, more interested in helping their mother with cooking and sewing than in ranch work. They adored all their older siblings, but especially Samuel, who was patient with their endless questions and games. One summer evening, when all the children were finally in bed, Franklin and Delilah sat on the porch as had become their habit. Franklin was whittling, making yet another toy for the younger girls, and Delilah was mending a tear in one of the boys' shirts. "You ever think about him?" Franklin asked suddenly. Samuel's biological father. Delilah looked up in surprise. It had been years since they had discussed the man who had fathered her first child. "No," she said honestly. "Sometimes I try to remember his face and I cannot. He is like a bad dream I have mostly forgotten." "Why do you ask?" "I was just thinking, he has no idea what he is missing. Samuel is such a fine boy and he will never know him. That man's loss is my gain, but still, it seems sad. To have a child out there in the world and not know him, not love him." "You are Samuel's father in every way that counts," Delilah said firmly. "That other man was he was nothing. A mistake I made that led me here to you, and I cannot regret it because it gave me Samuel and brought me to this life." Franklin set down his whittling and took her hand. "I am glad you see it that way, because Samuel is mine just as much as Rose and the twins and the little girls. I would do anything for that boy, die for him if I had to. He is my son. I know he is, and he knows it too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle in the distance. Then Franklin said, "I have been thinking we should tell him. About his biological father, I mean. Not now, but someday, when he is old enough to understand. I do not want there to be secrets between us." Delilah considered that. She had wondered occasionally if they should tell Samuel the truth, but she had been afraid of what it might do to his relationship with Franklin. What if it changes how he sees you? "It will not," Franklin said with certainty, "because I am his father. I have been his father since before he was born, but he deserves to know the truth about where he came from. We can tell him together when the time is right." Delilah nodded slowly. "All right. When he is older, we will tell him. Together." That conversation came 3 years later when Samuel was 16. He had grown into a fine young man, tall and strong with a kind heart and a quick mind. He was already being courted by several fathers in town who thought he would make a good match for their daughters, though Samuel seemed oblivious to the attention. One evening, Franklin asked Samuel to ride out with him to check on the north pasture. Delilah watched them go, her heart heavy with what she knew was about to happen. They had decided together that it was time to tell Samuel the truth. When they returned several hours later, Samuel came straight to Delilah. His eyes were red, and she could tell he had been crying. Her heart clenched with fear that this revelation had damaged their relationship, but then he pulled her into a fierce hug. "Papa told me," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "about my biological father, about how you came here." "I am sorry we did not tell you sooner," Delilah said, holding him tight. "We wanted to wait until you were old enough to understand." Samuel pulled back and looked at her. "I am glad you told me, and I want you to know it does not change anything. Papa is my father. He is the one who taught me to ride, who sat up with me when I was sick, who showed me how to be a man. Blood does not make a father, love does, and Papa loves me. I have never doubted that for a second." Delilah felt tears stream down her face. "He does love you so much, I know, and I love him. And you are my parents, the only parents I will ever need or want." That night, after Samuel had gone to bed, Franklin held Delilah as she cried tears of relief and gratitude. "He took it well," Franklin said. "Better than I hoped. He is a good boy. We raised him right." "We did," Delilah agreed. "We really did." The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also so much joy. Samuel eventually courted and married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sweet girl named Elizabeth who fit into the family perfectly. They built a small house on the edge of the property and began their own family, giving Franklin and Delilah their first grandchild, a boy they named Franklin after his grandfather. Rose married a young lawyer from Nevada City and moved into town, though she visited the ranch often, unable to stay away from the land she loved. James and John, still inseparable, took over much of the daily running of the ranch as Franklin aged, allowing him to spend more time with Delilah and the younger children. Anna and Alice, the babies of the family, grew into beautiful young women who were in no hurry to marry, content to help their mother with the increasingly complex task of feeding and clothing a family that now included grandchildren. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Franklin and Delilah renewed their vows in the little church in Nevada City, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. Reverend Walsh had passed, and his replacement, a young minister named Thomas, performed the ceremony. As Franklin slipped the ring back on Delilah's finger, the same simple gold band he had given her 25 years earlier, he said, "I would do it all again. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time." "And I would choose you," Delilah replied, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me. You gave me a life worth living. I love you more today than I did on the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." They kissed, and their children and grandchildren cheered, and Delilah felt a sense of completion that she had never imagined possible. This was her family, built from nothing, created out of desperation and hope and love that had grown stronger with each passing year. Years later, as Franklin and Delilah grew old together, they would sit on the porch in the evenings just as they always had. Franklin's hair had gone white, and his hands were gnarled with arthritis, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at Delilah. She had aged too, her hair silver and her face lined, but she was still beautiful to him, still the woman who had stepped off that stage coach and changed his life forever. Samuel ran the ranch now, with help from his brothers and his own sons. The house was full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, loud and chaotic and wonderful. Everything Franklin had dreamed of all those years ago had come true. The house was full of love and laughter, just as he had wanted. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, Delilah said, "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? When I told you I was pregnant," Franklin smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I said that baby will be mine too." "You did, and you kept that promise. You have been the father Samuel needed, the father all our children needed. You have been everything I could have asked for and so much more." Franklin took her hand, the gesture as natural as breathing after so many years together. "You gave me a family when I had none. You filled my life with purpose and meaning. Every day with you has been a gift." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sun sink below the mountains. Around them, the ranch bustled with life. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all carrying forward the legacy of love that Franklin and Delilah had built together. Samuel came out onto the porch, his own hair starting to gray now. "Papa, Mama, supper is ready. Are you coming in?" "In a minute," Franklin said. "We are just enjoying the evening." Samuel smiled, understanding. "Take your time. I will keep your plates warm." After he went back inside, Delilah leaned her head on Franklin's shoulder. "We did all right, did we not, with our life together?" Franklin kissed the top of her head. "We did better than all right. We built something beautiful, something that will last long after we are gone." And it would. The love they had created, the family they had built, would carry on through their children and their children's children. What had started as a desperate arrangement between two lonely people had become a legacy of love that would echo through generations. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Franklin and Delilah rose and went inside to join their family. The house was warm and bright, filled with the people they loved most in the world. This was what Franklin had dreamed of all those years ago when he had responded to a mail-order bride advertisement. This was what Delilah had hoped for when she had stepped off that stagecoach, scared and pregnant and alone. They had found each other in the wild, untamed landscape of Nevada City, California. Two broken people who had pieced each other back together and built something whole and beautiful from the fragments. Their love story had started with fear and uncertainty, but it had grown into something strong and enduring, a testament to the power of choosing love every single day. And as they sat down to dinner, surrounded by the noise and chaos and love of their family, both Franklin and Delilah knew that they had been blessed beyond measure. Not because their life had been easy, but because they had faced every challenge together, hand in hand, heart to heart. They had built a life worth living, a love worth having, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The mail-order bride had arrived pregnant, carrying another man's child and a burden of shame. The cowboy had said that baby would be his too. And in keeping that promise, he had created something far greater than either of them had dared to dream. He had created a family, a home, and a love that would last forever.